Just now, DA leader John Steenhuisen will tomorrow launch the party's 2024 election manifesto at the Union Buildings in Tshwane. To help us look ahead of what to expect is a political analyst, Professor Dirk Kotze. Professor, pleasure to have you on the program this evening. Well, firstly, the DA's manifesto launch is seen as a significant event, especially under the leadership of John Steenhuisen. So from your perspective, what key themes or policy areas do you expect the DA to prioritize in their manifesto, particularly in response to the current socio-economic challenges that the country faces?
Yes, I think you've identified the key focus, and that's socio-economic issues. So it starts with economic issues specifically, and the fact that there's high unemployment, the fact that the economy is not growing at any high rate, we have not serious problems, but problems with inflation, and that generally speaking, there's not a sense that the economy is very buoyant at the moment. So that's the one component. The social component of it is the DA is quite explicit about it, that they want to address the many social issues that are there, that they do support the social grants similar to the SASSA grants at the moment. Although this is far from the ideal, but they are not against that in principle as for the short term. So then they move on to the other components, which are all, especially infrastructural, which are necessary in order to kickstart the economy. So I guess this is what we should talk about also.
So in the same breath, and also building on the notion of the DA's manifesto launch as a historic moment, as the party proclaims, and also this declaration of intent to rescue South Africa, what specific measures or strategies do you believe the party should really undertake to distinguish itself and also regain momentum in the political arena?
Well, I think what the DA tries to do is to say that they provide an alternative. In the past, and quite a number of elections, what they've concentrated on is their record of government, and especially at local government level, and then also in the Western Cape province. Now, that's not on its own enough, because yes, you can do that, but the point is that the growth of the economy, for example, is something which goes beyond simply service delivery and providing of good governance in general. Although this is very important, but one has to get also, as a government or as a governing party, into the other issues of society. And the economy is, for many people, the number one. So it is, from their point of view, of how are they going to turn around the current blockages that exist in getting the economy more going. What they have identified is, first of all, that at the moment the approach of the ANC as government is too statist in nature. It is too much controlled from the center, from the state, and there's not enough space for the private sector to develop. Now, there's obviously some limitations on that. You can't just have a free-for-all situation. And I think this is where the DA will have to explain that they don't have a free-for-all approach, because many people believe that is the policy of the DA. I think then also infrastructural matters. What I think is going to dominate very much in this election is electricity, and the fact that we had this week load shedding in its extreme form again at level 6. So that is going to become, I think, a very key focus area of how to turn that around, because that is the drivers of any economy. Together with that will be water. Water is going to become, in future, I think, a really critical matter. There's lots of science in that direction already. Then other aspects, transport, the railway lines, and the ports, the harbors, especially for export purposes. These have become now over time, not only for the DA, but in general, key issues. And I think these will be the points of debate between the different parties in this election campaign. And the DA must demonstrate to all of us that they have ideas which go beyond those of the ANC or some of the other parties in order to really attract attention. And then lastly, I think the DA must, and that is possibly one of their main challenges, must demonstrate that they are not a white party, that they are not a party that comes from a very liberal background and that they are not in touch with the issues of especially the black part of the population in terms of what are important for them. And so that it becomes a diverse party. And that's the challenge of all political parties. There are actually, I don't think there's any party that can really claim success in that respect at this point in time.
Prof, I want to expand on your last train of thought. So, and also taking from Ivan Meyer, who's the DA's federal chairperson, he's emphasized the unprecedented mobilization efforts of the manifesto rally, indicating broad-based support beyond traditional strongholds. In your view, how crucial is this demonstration of support for the DA's electoral prospects, and what implications might it have for the campaign strategy moving forward?
Yes, I think it involves a number of things. To start with, they must demonstrate that they have support in the majority of provinces in South Africa. For very long, it was seen as mainly a party located within the Western Cape. Now, more lately, it's the majority of its votes it actually receives in Gauteng. So between Gauteng and the Western Cape, the majority of the DA's votes are mobilized. They've also entered into KwaZulu-Natal, and it seems like with this election they might make some progress together with the IFP. But in many other provinces, like for example Limpopo and Mpumalanga, they have very little support. And for a party to become ultimately a national party and a government in waiting, it must have support across the board in many parts of South Africa, and not only specific concentration points. Then at the same time, it must be a political party that is not sort of, in terms of its identity, associated with specific parts of the South African population. And I think this is one of the key components, key challenges, again, for many parties. Identity politics have become, in many instances, one of the key components, key characteristics of this election. You can think about the IFP, that's predominantly KwaZulu-Natal, the UDM predominantly in the Eastern Cape, the Good and other parties that are so-called colored parties or supported by colored persons. It's all about identity politics. And there's a certain ceiling in those respects. They can't go into becoming really national parties. And that is something that the DA must also be careful about. That they, despite their composition, that they are not perceived as a party of particular parts of the South African society. They must explain where their 20% comes from. If you go to DA events, I've attended last year, for example, their Federal Congress in the Midrand. It was possibly the most diverse political event that I've seen in South Africa lately. But they don't present it to the public as such. You know, the majority of South Africans don't see it like that. And I think that is the main challenge for the DA, how to project that on a wider scale.
Professor Kotze, considering the emphasis on a practical solution, especially in the DA's manifesto, how do you anticipate the party navigating the balance between addressing immediate crises such as the electricity shortage that you also mentioned, and also presenting long-term sustainable policies to foster economic growth and social development in this country?
Yeah, it's a major challenge because many people see what appears in election manifestos as purely promises, and they don't trust promises because there's no guarantees attached to them. And that's the general problem of political parties, because political parties, to a large extent, their time horizon is only the next 5 years. That is the mandate for the next term, the next parliamentary term. So it's very difficult for any political party to project that beyond this coming 5 years. And that will apply to the DA also. And I think what is an additional complication is the fact that many of the aspects that we are talking about now are moving so fast in terms of development. Take, for example, alternative energy, green electricity, green energy in general. The technology around that is developing at such a pace that it is very difficult to say what is going to be in future, the way in which that will be done. Another example is education. This artificial intelligence that's emerging now, and that makes a major impact, or will make a major impact on education in the future, is another example of how to integrate that into a future educational system in South Africa, which I believe is one of the key components for the success, especially the economic success of South Africa.
Prof, with the DA's commitment to its so-called meticulously researched, data-driven manifesto, how do you foresee the party communicating these policy proposals effectively to also resonate with a diverse electorate across South Africa?
I think when it comes to elections, what we see is that the process of communication is normally not very nuanced. It's not very sophisticated. It's not very backed up or driven by, for example, research or statistics or other forms of evidence that can support that. It's very much based on voice clips, on short phrases, in order to catch the attention of the media, as well as that of the public. So, unfortunately, the level of dialogue, if one can call that, or level of communication between political parties and the public is not a very sophisticated one. And I think what we are going to see even more will be that in some instances it will become actually quite populistic in nature, and that the parties will compete with each other in terms of presenting views that they think will be popular in the public domain. So though there might be good documents available to back it up, the public won't see it. No, I always say that I wonder how many people actually read these election manifestos. The EFF's manifesto is 260 pages. Apparently this one of the DA will be about 60 pages. Very few people like us will possibly read, but no one else.
So as we wrap up our conversation, the DA has also emphasized the importance of addressing issues such as wasteful spending, education investment, and also economic growth in its manifesto. How do you then envision the party translating these broad policy goals into actionable plans that really resonate with voters and differentiate the DA from its political rivals?
Well, it's all going to depend on what will be the outcome of the election. At the phase where we are at the moment, they will present it as plans that's in the pipeline, plans that have been developed as possible alternatives for what there is at the moment, the government's policy, the ANC government's policy. So the problem of especially opposition parties is that they can have excellent policies, but they can't implement it. It's only once they become part of government or be the party in government, or as I said, being part of a coalition government, for example, that they will come closer to the point of actually implementing those policies. And only then it will be possible to see if these policies actually can be implemented, that they can actually produce results. So what they have to do at this point in time is presenting them in the best possible light. At the same time, try to discredit the current policies of the government as much as possible, and then to present them as actually the only alternative. But we as the public will have no guarantees until they are implemented that these policies will indeed be able to work.
As we conclude our discussion with Professor Dirk Kotze, we've really delved into insightful perspectives on the upcoming DA manifesto launch and also the broader electoral landscape in